I always thought birthdays were supposed to be about celebration, about laughter, about feeling cherished and loved. But my 35th birthday was different. That night became the turning point of my life, a night etched into my memory so deeply that I can recall the faintest details: the flicker of candlelight on polished silver, the subtle scent of roses drifting across the table, and the icy grip of betrayal waiting in the shadows of the evening. I had rented the private dining room of a waterfront restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, for $2,400. It wasn't just about extravagance. It was about creating a moment of peace in my otherwise stormy life. I wanted everything perfect: cream-colored linens, tall vases filled with white roses, crystal glasses that shimmered under soft golden lights. The restaurant overlooked the Ashley River, and as the tide rolled in, I imagined the dinner as a chance to celebrate myself, to step into my mid-30s with grace. David, my husband of 7 years, sat beside me. His dark hair was neatly combed, his navy suit freshly pressed, his hand resting casually on the back of my chair, as though to remind the room he was mine. My sister Jessica sat across from us, draped in a silk emerald dress that caught every shimmer of light, drawing eyes toward her whether she asked for it or not. She was 4 years younger, endlessly dramatic, and had always known how to command a spotlight. The rest of my family was there too. My mother, Eleanor, wore her usual string of pearls, her posture so straight you'd think she had swallowed a ruler. My father, Charles, ordered a $200 bottle of wine without blinking, muttering about how birthdays deserved proper toasts. My Aunt Margaret was there, chatting away about her garden in Savannah, and my cousin Henry filled the silence with stories from his law practice. For the first half hour, everything seemed smooth, predictable, almost comforting. The first course arrived: lobster bisque, delicate and creamy. Laughter filled the room as Henry told a joke about a client who thought contracts could be signed in pencil. I smiled, sipping my wine, savoring the warmth that spread through me. For a fleeting moment, I believed that perhaps this year would be different, but I should have known better. Halfway through the evening, Jessica cleared her throat. She stood up slowly, placing a perfectly manicured hand over her stomach. A hush fell over the table. Her smirk was subtle but unmistakable, the same one she used to wear as a child when she stole my toys and dared me to take them back. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice smooth and deliberate. She let the words hang in the air for effect before continuing. "I'm pregnant!" Gasps erupted around the table. My mother clutched her pearls tighter, my father's brow furrowed as he mumbled something about propriety. But Jessica wasn't done. She tilted her head slightly, eyes locking onto mine like a predator cornering prey. "And the father," she said, pausing with theatrical cruelty, "is David." My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the porcelain plate. A wave of silence rippled through the room, thick and suffocating. I could feel every eye on me, waiting, watching for the inevitable collapse. Jessica's lips curved into a smug little smile as if she had been rehearsing this moment for weeks, maybe months. David froze beside me, his jaw tightening, his hand slowly withdrawing from my chair. The air between us grew colder than the ice melting in our glasses. My mother whispered "disgraceful" under her breath, and my father muttered about family honor. Jessica's gaze burned into me, expecting me to break, to cry, to rage in humiliation. But she didn't know me as well as she thought. I had seen the signs long before this night. David's late meetings stretched past midnight, his sudden weekend trips to Atlanta with flimsy excuses. The scent of perfume that wasn't mine lingered faintly on his shirts. At first, I dismissed it all. I told myself marriage had rough patches, that careers demanded sacrifices. But when the excuses piled up too neatly, I called a private investigator from Atlanta, paying him $12,000 to uncover the truth. And uncover it, he did. He handed me a thick folder of evidence: receipts from hotels in Savannah, photographs of David meeting Jessica in parking lots, transcripts of hushed phone calls. But the most damning proof wasn't in their secret meetings. It was in Boston that David had undergone a vasectomy 2 years earlier. I had the medical records, the doctor's signature, and the confirmation that my husband could not father children. So when Jessica stood there, triumphant in her betrayal, I didn't fall apart. I didn't scream or cry. I simply reached for my wine glass, lifted it high, and smiled. "Well," I said, my voice calm, almost cheerful. "Isn't that something?" Confusion flickered across Jessica's face. She had prepared for a meltdown, not composure. I set my glass down, leaned forward, and placed a folder on the table. My heart pounded, but I kept my tone steady. "Here's the funny thing," I said. "David had a vasectomy 2 years ago. I have the records right here. So whatever miracle you think you're carrying, it isn't his." The room froze. Utter silence. The only sound was the faint lapping of water against the pier outside. Jessica's smile dissolved, her hand trembling against her stomach. David's face turned ghostly pale, his eyes darting from me to the folder as though it might explode. My mother's lips parted in shock, and my father's wine glass slipped from his hand, spilling red liquid across the white tablecloth. No one spoke for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Jessica stammered, "You're lying." I pushed the folder toward her, my eyes never leaving hers. "See for yourself. Every receipt, every record, every detail. I know everything, and tonight so does everyone else." She didn't reach for the folder. She didn't have to. The panic in her eyes betrayed her. David's silence only confirmed it. The perfect facade they had built, the secret alliance they thought would stay hidden, crumbled in front of the very family they had hoped to impress. I leaned back in my chair, my heartbeat finally slowing, and took another sip of wine. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. The dinner ended in chaos. My mother scolded Jessica, my father stormed out muttering about family ruin, and David slipped away into the night without a word. Jessica remained at the table, staring blankly at her untouched dessert, the weight of her shattered scheme pressing down on her shoulders. As for me, I left the restaurant with my head held high. The night had begun as a celebration of my birth, but it ended as a declaration of my rebirth. The woman who had entered that room was weary, doubtful, and hurt. The woman who walked out was something else entirely, resolute, unshaken, and ready for the storm that was yet to come. That was the night I learned that sometimes survival isn't about fighting in the moment. It's about preparing for it long before anyone else sees the storm coming. And on my 35th birthday, I didn't just survive my sister's betrayal. I dismantled it piece by piece under the glow of candlelight and the eyes of those who thought they knew me. It was the birthday I would never forget. The morning after my birthday dinner, I woke up in my Broad Street home, staring at the pale, blue walls of my bedroom. The house felt strangely quiet, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. My phone was buzzing nonstop with missed calls. My mother, my father, even my Aunt Margaret. Each wanted answers, explanations, and damage control. But I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in saving face anymore. This time, I was going to save myself. By mid-morning, I sat in the office of Linda Foster, one of Charleston's most respected divorce attorneys. Her reputation was legendary, sharp, unyielding, and brutally effective in the courtroom. Her rate was $750 an hour, a staggering sum that once would have made me hesitate. But after what had unfolded the night before, money was the last thing I intended to let stop me. Linda was a tall woman with sleek silver hair pulled into a chignon and eyes as piercing as glass. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. After a firm handshake, she gestured for me to sit, slid a yellow legal pad across the desk, and said simply, "Tell me everything." And I did. For 2 hours, I lay it all out. The investigator's evidence, the medical records from Boston, the confrontation at my birthday dinner, the way David had looked guilty yet frozen, and Jessica's smug announcement unraveling before everyone's eyes. Linda took notes with precise strokes of her fountain pen, asking questions only when necessary. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the pad and leaned back. "You have a rock-solid case for a fault-based divorce," she said. "Adultery, fraud, marital misconduct. It's all here. With the evidence you've collected, the court will not only grant you a divorce but also protect your assets. We'll move quickly to freeze joint accounts, Secure your interest in the Broad Street house and make sure your husband doesn't siphon funds while we proceed. Her confidence wrapped around me like armor. For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of safety. That very afternoon, Linda's team filed motions. By evening, the court had issued a temporary order freezing our joint checking account and restricting withdrawals above $500 without dual consent. My personal savings account of $480,000, which I had guarded fiercely over the years, was now secured. The Broad Street home, valued at $1.8 million, was placed under my exclusive possession pending the outcome of the divorce. When David was served the papers 2 days later, his fury erupted. He stormed into the house late that night, shouting accusations of betrayal, claiming I had ruined him. I stood at the top of the staircase, clutching the banister, my lawyer's words echoing in my head. Do not engage, do not argue, document everything. So I held my phone discreetly at my side, recording his outburst as he shouted about family loyalty and how could you humiliate me like that. Eventually, he slammed the door so hard the windows rattled, leaving me standing in silence with tears burning my eyes. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal filings, court dates, and endless paperwork. Linda guided me through every step, her voice calm and steady, a lighthouse in my storm. She presented the investigators photographs, grainy images of David and Jessica slipping into hotels in Savannah. She produced credit card statements showing late-night purchases of champagne and expensive dinners. And then came the decisive blow, the certified medical documents proving David's vasectomy in Boston. In the courtroom, David's attorney tried to argue technicalities, suggesting the surgery might have failed, that the pregnancy could still be his. But Linda was relentless. She brought in a urologist from Massachusetts to testify, explaining in precise medical terms how the success rate was near certain and that there was no record of any reversal procedure. The judge's expression hardened as the truth became undeniable. Within 3 hearings, the court ruled decisively in my favor. David was ordered to vacate the Broad Street house within 30 days, leaving me with sole possession. Our joint accounts were divided cleanly, with my assets safeguarded. The judge even considered spousal misconduct when dividing property, ensuring I wasn't penalized for David's betrayal. Jessica, meanwhile, was unraveling. At first, she clung to the hope that David might stand by her, whispering to family members that they were going to build a life together. But when the divorce papers became public and David realized his financial ruin was inevitable, he vanished from her world entirely. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. He stopped appearing at family dinners, stopped speaking to anyone in Charleston, and soon after, I heard whispers he had moved into a rental apartment in Atlanta. The scandal spread through Charleston's social circles like wildfire. In a city where heritage and reputation carry as much weight as money, whispers of adultery and betrayal traveled fast. Friends of friends repeated the story in hushed tones over cocktails at waterfront clubs. At church on Sunday mornings, I could feel eyes lingering on me, pitying, curious, sometimes even admiring. My mother buried herself in denial, telling anyone who would listen that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. My father simply stopped talking about it altogether, his silence louder than any words. As for Jessica, she stopped showing up at social events. She once relished being the center of attention, the sister who turned heads with her dramatic entrances and flirtatious laughs. Now, her absence was its own statement. Rumors about her pregnancy swirled endlessly. Speculation about who the real father might be, whether David had abandoned her, whether she would move away in shame. I, on the other hand, began to breathe again. Nights still felt heavy, loneliness creeping into the corners of my Broad Street home, but I no longer felt powerless. Each court ruling, each victory Linda secured, reminded me that I was not broken. I had choices, and I had the strength to make them. One evening, after yet another day in court, Linda poured me a glass of wine in her office. "You're doing remarkably well," she said, handing me the glass. "Most clients in your position would have crumbled. But you," she paused, studying me with a rare softness in her gaze. "You walked into this battle already prepared. You didn't just survive your husband's betrayal, You dismantled it before he even knew what hit him." Her words stayed with me. They became the mantra I repeated when doubt crept in during quiet nights. By the time David moved his belongings out of the house, escorted by movers and watched carefully by a court-appointed officer, I no longer felt rage. I watched him carry out his suits, his books, and the guitar he rarely played, and I realized he was no longer part of my story. His betrayal had written him out of it. Jessica's betrayal still cut deep, but in the quiet of my home, surrounded by the strength of my own choices, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The legal battle wasn't just about property or money or even betrayal. It was about reclaiming myself. And as the gavel fell on the final ruling, echoing through the courtroom, I knew the war was over. The pieces of my old life had shattered, but in their place I had built something stronger, something entirely my own. Time has a strange way of stretching and folding when your life is turned upside down. The weeks after the divorce seemed to crawl, each day heavy with paperwork, whispered gossip, and the awkward silence of family members who didn't know what to say to me. But once the judge's final ruling came down, life shifted into a new rhythm. The drama that had consumed me slowly began to recede, like a storm cloud drifting over the horizon. And yet, the storm wasn't truly gone. Jessica's pregnancy remained the unspoken thunder, rumbling in the distance. She avoided me entirely in those early months. We didn't cross paths at family dinners or chance encounters in Charleston's small social circles. My mother still tried to bridge the gap, offering vague updates when she called me, but even she couldn't disguise the strain in her voice. Jessica had moved temporarily to Savannah, hiding away in a townhouse paid for by a friend. That friend, of course, wasn't David. The truth about the baby's father came out more quickly than I expected. One humid July afternoon, I received a phone call from Linda, my attorney. "I thought you'd want to know," she said, her voice clipped, as though even she found the news distasteful. "The man tied to your sister isn't your ex-husband. It's Mark Ellison. I'm sure you've heard of him." I had. Anyone in Charleston or Savannah who paid attention to real estate had heard of him. Mark Ellison was a 45-year-old developer from Atlanta, worth nearly $20 million, known for swooping into historic neighborhoods and flipping crumbling properties into luxury condos. He had a wife, Caroline, and 2 teenage children. His name was often in the society pages, his smile wide and confident at charity galas and ribbon cuttings. Hearing his name connected to my sister's pregnancy made my stomach twist. The scandal was no longer confined to my family. It was about to engulf 2. A few weeks later, I found myself in Savannah on business for my firm, and curiosity drew me past the hospital where Jessica was due any day. I told myself I wasn't there for her, but for closure, for proof that this story was real and not just another rumor swirling in Charleston's drawing rooms. And then, almost as if fate demanded I face it head-on, I received a call from my mother. Jessica had gone into labor. I hesitated, torn between anger and compassion. But in the end, blood has a pull, and I drove to the hospital. When I entered the maternity ward, the smell of antiseptic and faint echoes of newborn cries filled the air. I spotted my mother first, pacing in the waiting room. My father sat slouched in a chair, his jaw tight, his silence heavy. Neither spoke when they saw me, but neither turned me away either. Hours later, a nurse appeared and led us to Jessica's room. She looked exhausted, her once carefully styled hair damp with sweat, her face pale but glowing in the way only new mothers seem to glow. In her arms was the baby, tiny, fragile, with a tuft of dark curls and startling blue eyes that seemed too wise for someone minutes old. For a moment, everything else fell away. My resentment, my anger, my grief. It all faded when I looked at that child. Innocence wrapped in a blanket, completely unaware of the chaos into which he had been born. Jessica caught my eye. Her lips trembled, and for once, she didn't smirk, didn't play the role of the triumphant younger sister. She looked vulnerable, frightened. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked softly. I hesitated, but then I reached out. The baby was warm, impossibly light in my arms. He blinked up at me, his tiny fingers curling as if to grab onto something, anything, that would anchor him in this messy world. My chest tightened. He wasn't to blame for any of this. The days that followed were filled with speculation. DNA testing confirmed what Linda had told me. David was not the father. The results pointed squarely at Mark Ellison. And soon enough, the news reached Mark's wife. Caroline Ellison was no fool. She had built her life with Mark, brick by brick, supporting his real estate empire while raising their children. When she learned about Jessica and the baby, she made one thing clear: she was not leaving her husband, and he was not leaving her. Mark, desperate to protect his reputation and assets, provided financial support quietly, but refused to acknowledge the child publicly. For Jessica, the rejection was devastating. She had built her world around the idea that Mark would be her savior, that he would leave Caroline and whisk her into a life of wealth and comfort. Instead, she was left alone in a rented townhouse in Savannah, with a newborn and no partner by her side. At first, she resisted the idea of help. She pushed our parents away, declined offers of support, and locked herself inside with the baby. But soon the cracks began to show. Sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and the crushing reality of being a single mother without the fantasy she had imagined. It wasn't long before she spiraled into depression. It was my mother who finally convinced her to seek therapy. She drove Jessica to her first session, sitting in the waiting room while my sister confessed her grief and guilt to a stranger. Over time, Jessica began to attend weekly, clinging to the fragile lifeline therapy offered. I wish I could say I felt nothing, that her pain was simply justice. But the truth is more complicated. One evening, months after the baby's birth, I drove to Savannah to visit. I told myself I was there out of obligation, but when Jessica opened the door, holding the baby on her hip, I felt something shift inside me. Her face was tired, her shoulders slumped, but her eyes, those same eyes that once sparkled with mischief, looked broken. Would you like to see him?" she asked timidly. I nodded. The baby reached for me immediately, his small hands grasping my necklace. Jessica watched me carefully, then cleared her throat. "I was wondering, would you consider being his godmother?" The question hung in the air between us. My first instinct was to recoil. How could I, after everything she had done? After the betrayal, the lies, the humiliation? But then I looked down at the child in my arms. He smiled, toothless and pure, and my heart cracked open. "Yes," I whispered, surprising even myself. "I'll do it. Not for you, for him." Tears filled Jessica's eyes. She nodded, her lips pressing together as if to hold back words she wasn't ready to say. That night, driving back to Charleston, I wrestled with my decision. It didn't absolve her. It didn't erase what she had done. But perhaps it gave me a way to move forward without bitterness poisoning me. The baby deserved stability, love, and a chance at a future untethered from the mistakes of the adults around him. If I could provide even a fraction of that, then maybe something good could be salvaged from this wreckage. The scandal still lingered in whispers across Charleston and Savannah. People speculated about Mark Ellison's secret payments, about Jessica's therapy, about my decision to step into the role of godparent. But I no longer cared about their chatter. My life was no longer dictated by other people's opinions. For Jessica, the journey was only beginning. She was fragile, uncertain, but perhaps on the path to healing. For me, the role of godmother wasn't about forgiveness. It was about reclaiming a sense of agency. About choosing, for once, to define my relationships on my terms. The baby had changed everything. Not by design, not by choice, but by simply existing. He was a reminder that even in betrayal, even in brokenness, there could be new beginnings. And as I held him in my arms, I realized that sometimes healing doesn't come from erasing the past. It comes from building something new alongside it. A year can feel like a lifetime when you've walked through fire and come out the other side. Looking back now, I can hardly recognize the woman who sat in that Charleston restaurant, bracing for humiliation on her 35th birthday. I see her, the pain in her eyes, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her shoulders, but I don't carry her anymore. She was the starting point, the broken place. I am someone else now, stronger, freer. Finally, my own. After the divorce was finalized, I poured my energy into my career. My position as a project manager for a Boston-based tech firm had always been stable, but I had played it safe, afraid to step too far outside the expectations my family had drilled into me since childhood. I was supposed to be the reliable one, the quiet one, the woman who followed rules while others chased chaos. But that version of me no longer existed. When a major contract came up, an expansion project valued at nearly $20 million, I put myself forward to lead it. A year earlier, I might have shrank back, doubting my ability, afraid of rejection. But now I walked into the boardroom with a fire in my chest and evidence of what I had survived. If I could endure betrayal, if I could rebuild my life from the ashes of deceit, then I could certainly handle a room full of executives. The project was grueling, demanding 12-hour days and cross-country flights between Charleston, Boston, and even New York. But it was also exhilarating. My team delivered ahead of schedule, and the client's satisfaction secured not only the contract, but also my promotion. My salary leapt by $40,000, raising me to $160,000 annually. The money mattered, of course. It gave me independence, security, the ability to dream again. But more than that, it was validation. Proof that I was more than someone's wife, more than someone's daughter, more than the sister who had always been overlooked. With my finances secure, I made another life-altering decision. I sold the Broad Street home. That house had been beautiful, yes. $1.8 million of Southern elegance with tall columns and sprawling porches. But it was also haunted. Every corner echoed with David's lies, every hallway whispered of late-night phone calls with Jessica. I couldn't heal there. I needed a fresh start. I bought a restored colonial home in Savannah for $1.2 million. It had a wraparound porch, a sprawling garden filled with magnolias and roses, and wide windows that poured golden light into every room. The first time I walked through the door, I felt it, a sense of belonging I had never felt in the Charleston house. This was mine, not because of anyone else, but because of me. Savannah quickly became more than a backdrop. It became a home. I fell in love with its cobblestone streets, its squares shaded by ancient oak trees dripping with Spanish moss, its quiet corners where I could sit with a book and coffee and not feel judged. I found new friends, people who didn't know me as David's wife or Jessica's sister, but simply as me. There was Grace, a painter who lived 2 doors down and filled her home with canvases of vibrant color. There was Daniel, a widowed professor of history who shared his stories over long dinners and reminded me that intellect could be gentle, not weaponized. And there was Maya, a single mother who balanced chaos and joy with a strength that inspired me. These people became my chosen family. They showed up at my house with casseroles when I worked late. They invited me to Sunday brunches in the city. And they sat with me on the porch on evenings when the quiet felt too heavy. Slowly, the holes left behind by betrayal began to close. Meanwhile, Jessica was still piecing her life back together. Therapy had become her lifeline, helping her face the reality she had spent years running from. We weren't close, not the way sisters should be, but we were no longer enemies. The baby, now crawling and full of laughter, tied us together in unexpected ways. As his godmother, I visited often, bringing toys, books, and a stability Jessica couldn't always provide. I kept my boundaries firm, though. I loved the child. But I refused to let old wounds drag me back into dysfunction. David had all but vanished. From what I heard, he was living in Atlanta, bouncing between jobs, struggling to rebuild his reputation after the divorce became public record. I felt nothing when his name surfaced in conversation. No rage, no sorrow. Just emptiness. He was a chapter long closed, and I had no interest in reopening it. As my 36th birthday approached, I knew I wanted to mark it differently. No family drama, no whispered scandals, no shadows of betrayal. Just joy. I invited my new friends, my coworkers, and even a few neighbors. I spent weeks preparing, choosing wines, stringing lights across the garden, and filling vases with roses cut fresh from my own yard. The night arrived warm and clear. The garden glowed with fairy lights, the air filled with laughter and music. Grace set up an easel in one corner, painting the scene as it unfolded. Daniel recited a toast about resilience and history, making everyone laugh with his dry humor. Maya brought her daughter, who ran through the grass with the baby in her arms, their giggles rising into the night like a melody. I stood on the porch with a glass of wine, looking out at the people gathered there. My people, my family, chosen not by blood, but by love, respect, and trust. When the clock struck 9, someone called for a toast. I raised my glass high, the memory of last year's birthday flashing through my mind, the smug smile on Jessica's face, the gasps of my parents, the cold silence of David. That night had shattered me. But this night rebuilt me. To new beginnings, I said, my voice steady, my heart full. To the people who remind us that family isn't always about where we come from, but about where we choose to go. And to the strength we find when we stop living for others and finally start living for ourselves. The glasses clinked, the cheer rose, and for the first time in years, I felt light. As the evening wore on, I slipped away to the porch, sitting quietly under the stars. The garden hummed with conversation, but I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, letting the peace settle into my bones. I had survived betrayal, endured heartbreak, walked through fire, and come out not scorched but transformed. My 36th birthday wasn't just a party. It was a reclaiming, a declaration, a reminder that the life I wanted wasn't behind me, but ahead. And for the first time in a long, long time, I looked forward to the years to come with hope.